Hello, this is Patrice. Excuse me. And for the next hour, I'll be reading from the July 7th issue of the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Facing threats, NATO finds new value in Turkey. As President Trump cools on the alliance, its members see Turkey's large military and vibrant defense sector as assets. By Ben Hubbard. Just a few years ago, Turkey was seen as the bad boy of NATO. It wrangled allies by slow-walking bids from countries seeking to join the military alliance. It refused to apply Western sanctions on Russia over the war in Ukraine. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan referred to his Russian counterpart, President Vladimir V. Putin, as a dear friend. European and American officials worried about Mr. Erdogan's strongman tendencies. Now, global developments, including the wars in Ukraine and Iran and the return of President Trump to the White House, have dealt Turkey a new hand, increasing the country's value in the eyes of its NATO allies, according to analysts and officials from a number of NATO countries. When Mr. Erdogan welcomes NATO leaders in the Turkish capital, Ankara, this week for their summit meeting, it will be as the head of a country whose defense industry and large military are seen as critical for the alliance's future and as a leader with a unique ability to charm Mr. Trump. There is a recognition of Turkey's importance to NATO, Turkey's Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan said in an interview with the New York Times the week before the summit. There is an awakening in light of the new security and threat environment in Europe. The summit will take place amid an extensive crackdown on Mr. Erdogan's political opponents, but the alliance's great power, the United States, has stopped speaking out on such issues. And so private concerns among other NATO members about Mr. Erdogan's autocratic governance are unlikely to be raised publicly. Many member states are prioritizing building their ability to deter and possibly defend against Russian attacks. The wolf at the door is not the state of Turkish democracy for Europeans, said John Arbas, a former U.S. ambassador to Turkey. This NATO summit will be the first in Turkey since 2004, when George W. Bush was president and Mr. Erdogan was a first-term prime minister. Turkey has planned the event to showcase its status as a rising power. Arriving delegations will land on a freshly paved runway and enter a gleaming new VIP terminal. The summit on Tuesday and Wednesday will convene inside Mr. Erdogan's sprawling presidential compound. The first day will feature a defense forum allowing Turkish companies to show off their drones and other Turkish-made weapons. The allies will convene on the second day to discuss defense budgets and military industrial capacity. Many alliance members are concerned about the future. The war in Ukraine has depleted European arsenals, putting a focus on the ability of NATO members to manufacture arms and munitions. Mr. Trump has threatened to reduce the role of the United States or completely withdraw from the alliance, raising fears that he might not send forces if Russia were to attack NATO allies. It remains unclear what concrete gains Turkey could reap during the summit. Trump administration officials have said they would like to sell Turkey advanced F-35 fighter jets, which Turkey was barred from buying after it acquired a Russian S-400 air defense system in 2019. But Mr. Erdogan can claim one victory before the event even begins. Without him, Mr. Trump might not have agreed to attend. If not for the fact that it is being held in Turkey by President Erdogan, I don't think I would have gone for it, Mr. Trump told reporters in the Oval Office recently. Turkey joined NATO in 1952, but relations with its partners have not always been smooth. When Ankara acquired the air defense system from Russia, that led some allies to see Turkey as being too close to a major adversary. These concerns deepened after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, when Turkey kept buying Russian oil and gas, and Mr. Erdogan continued his cordial meetings with Mr. Putin. Turkey has long accused its allies of ignoring its domestic security concerns, holding back on defense cooperation, and failing to appreciate the competing pressures of its geographic position between Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. The past few years have led to a new appreciation of what Turkey brings to the alliance. Its broad diplomatic relations include not just major countries in the East and West, but also across the Balkans, Africa, and the Middle East. Turkey has used these relationships to mediate in various crises. Turkey helped to keep Syria from collapsing into chaos after the fall of the dictator Bashar al Assad in 2024. It leveraged its relationship with the Palestinian militant group Hamas in peace talks aimed at ending the Gaza war. It has maintained contacts in Iran throughout the war there, despite being repeatedly targeted with Iranian missiles. Its leaders talk regularly with top officials from both Ukraine and Russia, and even Mr. Erdogan's relationship with Mr. Putin is seen in a new light. As the conflict in Ukraine is dragged on, some of the European allies find it useful to have a conduit that can engage the Russians, said Mr. Bass, a former ambassador. I'm going to skip ahead to the end of this article. For now, the desire to work with Turkey while NATO confronts its challenges has won Mr. Erdogan a key benefit: silence from his allies as he further expands his domestic power. Turkey's most prominent op- opposition presidential hopeful, Ekrem İmamoğlu, the former mayor of Istanbul, remains in jail while defending himself in what is widely viewed as a political trial. A Turkish court recently ousted leadership of Turkey's main opposition party, replacing its head with a man, Mr. Erdogan, already defeated in 2023 presidential election. In private, officials from NATO countries worry about Turkey's commitment to the values outlined in the alliance's founding treaty: individual liberty, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. But amid deep concern about the security of their own countries, few speak up. European capitals have less bandwidth to focus on the erosion of democratic practices and norms in Turkey, Mr. Bass said. Trump defends asking FIFA to review U.S. soccer stars ban. The president said he called the head of FIFA but didn't tell him what to do. The overturning of the ban has roiled soccer and brought renewed scrutiny to the relationship between the two leaders. This article is by Erica L. Green and Tariq Panja. President Trump on Monday defended his decision to request that FIFA review a ban issued to a star player on the U.S. men's soccer team, saying he was motivated to make the extraordinary intervention because he felt that a suspect referee made a bad call. Mr. Trump called Gianni Infantino, the president of FIFA, in the hours after the United States men's soccer team plays Wednesday and asked him to review the suspension of the team's top goal scorer in the World Cup, Folarin Balogun, after he was given a red card. On Sunday, FIFA reversed the decision, a remarkable development that has roiled the soccer world and brought renewed scrutiny to the close relationship between Mr. Trump and Mr. Infantino. I didn't tell him what to do. I can't tell him what to do, Mr. Trump said, and I don't believe he made the decision. I think it was a committee that made the decision, and they made the right decision because, number one, it wasn't a foul and you want to see a game with your best players. The sudden reinstatement of Mr. Balogun for the U.S. team's knockout game against Belgium on Monday night went against all known norms in modern World Cup history and what appear to be FIFA's regulations on dealing with red card offenses, which have led to other players in the tournament receiving minimum automatic one-game suspensions. The decision, the first time since 1962 when the rules were less clear, that FIFA has overturned an in-tournament World Cup game suspension, threatens to taint a surprising run by the U.S. team in a year when Americans have embraced their hosting of the tournament. I didn't know what the hell a red card was, Mr. Trump said. When I found out, I said, you got to be kidding. You know, it's one thing to penalize somebody for the game, but how do you penalize them for a game that hasn't been played yet? He added later, expressing consternation over a routine disciplinary measure in international soccer. It's very unfair. You can't do that. So, yes, I asked for a review by FIFA. I spoke to a man who's highly respected, and by the way, whose level of respect has gone up tenfold. Mr. Infantino For Mr. Infantino, the decision could have had a ruinous impact. Soccer officials and coaches from around the world have criticized the decision, and the FIFA president is already the subject of a complaint to the organization's ethics body amid allegations he breached FIFA's rules on political neutrality by awarding Mr. Trump a hastily created Peace Prize in December. While Mr. Infantino has been the subject of ridicule and scorn after his years-long effort to court Mr. Trump, the fury at what could be the first of these efforts to directly affect matters on the field has been of a different scale. Mr. Infantino confirmed after Mr. Trump's remarks on Monday that the two spoke, but insisted that the decision resulted from an independent process. During our conversation, I explained that there was an ongoing legal process involving FIFA's independent judicial bodies and that the case would be decided in due course by the competent bodies, he said in a statement. That is how FIFA's system works, and it is a principle that I will always uphold. Again, I'm going to fast forward towards the end of the article. Mr. Trump said he decided to act when he learned of the implications of the red card, saying that when they take your best player or just about is very unfair. FIFA gave Belgium the right to appeal, and on Monday, the Belgian Federation announced that its appeal had been dismissed. In a statement, it said that the chairman of the FIFA Appeal Committee, Neil Eggleston, who is from the United States and was not involved in the decision, said that the request was rendered inadmissible because Belgium was not a party to the proceedings and, as such, has no standing to appeal the decision. Mr. Balogun has been a critical part of the U.S. run to the round of 16, scoring 3 goals as the team has turned around its poor form before the tournament to generate anticipation about just how far it could go. Mr. Trump implied the U.S. match against Belgium on Monday night would be fair after his intervention because both teams would have their full slate of players, and he invoked his false claims that he won the 2020 election. And we're going to have a full team, and Belgium is going to have a full team, he said. And you know what? If they beat us, then they can be really proud. The other way, if they beat us, I'd say it was rigged, just like the election was rigged in 2020. Now I feel the need to share the results of that game. And this analysis overturned this Belgium delight in defeating U.S. after day of World Cup legal rose. This article is by Tim Spires. Overturn this with 2 words: Belgium's social media team, Belgium's football team, basically the entire nation of Belgium collectively dropped a supersized mic on the United States. It was the zinger of the World Cup. American fries were drowned with creamy Belgian mayonnaise. The United States is a pretty big country, around 320 times the size of Belgium. FIFA is a fairly sizable, important organization, too. And the guy who is the leader of the free world, President Donald Trump, well, he's quite influential. So it must have felt like the weight of the world was bearing down on Belgium's players and their embattled coach, Rudy Garcia, as they unwittingly found themselves in the epicenter of one of the most controversial decisions in the long history in the World Cup. And there have been a few. President Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio were even telling Belgium what to think about Fuller and Balogun's reinstatement to the USMNT side. We're going to have a full team, and Belgium is going to have a full team, Trump said. And you know what? If they beat us, then they can be really proud. The other way, if they beat us, I'd say it was just rigged, just like the election. But I won't go into that. Sorry, I already read that. Secretary of State Rubio chimed in, if you're Belgium, why would you want to play a game and win a match and then you win this match and then everyone will argue you didn't really win because their best player, leading scorer, was not there during the match? Belgium aren't involved in international incidents often. How did they respond? Did they cower under the expectation of a country whose population dwarfs their own by 330 million? Nope. The exact opposite. They came prepared with a game plan, ruthlessly enacted it in devastatingly clinical fashion, and broke the hearts of a nation 1 goal at a time. Revenge? Absolutely. Again, I'm going to skip towards the end. Let's be honest. We held a meeting when we heard the news, he revealed. We told ourselves we needed to do our talking on the pitch. That's what we did today. I'm very proud of the team. As Lukaku cupped his ears, suggested there had been too much talk, and then the whole squad wildly celebrated his route, completing a 4th goal. It confirmed the Balogun episode and had probably only benefited one nation, the little one. And it's probably in there somewhere, but the score was 4-1 with Belgium winning. And spoiler, I'm Belgian, so I'm a little biased in this article, so I hope you don't mind. Um, all right. As a reminder, you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. I am abbreviating some articles, but if I skip parts and you would like to hear them in their entirety, the number to call is 716-821-5555. Ukraine remade air defense, but Russia has changed its attacks. Ukraine has changed how militaries use Patriot systems, but recent attacks prove that clever adaptations cannot overcome a shortage of interceptors. This article is by Siobhan O'Grady and Lyubov Sholodko. Ukrainian troops returned home from training in the United States and Germany 3 years ago, adept at the standard way of using the Patriot system so critical to air defenses. But with limited supplies and nonstop Russian barrages, they quickly realized that they would need to rewrite the rules. So Ukrainians started to experiment. For example, each battery or firing unit in the mobile surface to air Patriot defense system holds interceptors that are launched to stop ballistic missiles midair before they crash onto the earth. The Ukrainians learned to often fire just one interceptor at incoming ballistic missiles instead of the usual two or more because of the shortages of the expensive American made weapons. They also set the Patriots to manual mode to avoid automatic firing on targets like slow moving, inexpensive drones that could be taken down by other means. They learned to shoot down drones with machine guns operated from rooftops, truck beds, and helicopters, and more recently, with interceptor drones that can take down the Russian drones mid flight. Ukrainian forces largely reserve the Patriots for trying to stop only the fastest moving ballistic missiles. These tactics, described in interviews with Ukrainian air defense commanders and experts, were once viewed as the last resort of a scrappy military with limited resources. But such adaptation is increasingly important as Ukrainian cities face an onslaught of barrages from Russia, as they did with an attack on Monday. The evolution of tactics is also becoming an essential battlefield model as the war in Iran and the attacks in the Gulf have drained global supplies of the most advanced Patriot interceptors. Ukrainian soldiers have already deployed to the Gulf to train local troops on cheaper and more effective tactics to intercept drones. We initially used the tactics and the knowledge that we had been taught in America, said Vyashalav Ayav, the commander of a Patriot unit in Ukraine who trained on the system at Fort Sill in Oklahoma. Once combat use began, he said, Ukrainians realized they had to introduce some of our own experience and skills and slightly change the tactics of employment, moving away from the templates that we had been taught in the United States. Other tactics the Ukrainians have adopted include learning to shoot and scoot, quickly moving the batteries after firing to prevent Russia from targeting the batteries in counterstrikes. They also employed deception to lure Russian fire away, hiding their real Patriot batteries under camouflage while producing realistic decoys that run just 30,000 apiece. A fully loaded Patriot system is worth roughly 1 billion. Several countries have also reached out to Ukraine requesting exports of Patriot decoys, according to a leading manufacturer of the devices who spoke on the condition of anonymity because his factories are top Russian targets. Despite the innovation, the Ukrainian approach is far from enough to keep the country from being hammered by Russian missiles and drones. Russia regularly launches barrages of various types of missiles and drones that overwhelm Ukraine's exhausted, overworked, and dangerously undersupplied air defense operators. In particular, Moscow has ramped up production of ballistic missiles. Ballistic missiles move much faster than cruise missiles, and Patriots are the only air defense system in Ukraine's arsenal that can shoot them down. Ukraine has other air defense systems that can intercept cruise missiles. In the attack early on Monday that killed at least 12 people, Russia launched 68 missiles and 351 drones into Ukraine, according to Ukraine's Air Force. None of the 23 ballistic missiles were intercepted, but most of the cruise missiles were. Again, I'm skipping to the end. But significant resupply anytime soon remains unlikely. The shortage caused by the war with Iran has made Ukraine even less of a priority, said Tom Caraco, a missile defense analyst at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington. The U.S. is trying to rapidly increase production for itself to replenish everything we just shot up over the past 6 months, he said. Everyone wants more, and not everyone can have more all at the same time. Ukraine is designing its own air defense systems, which are not likely to be as effective as Patriots, yet could at least offer some additional protection. But rolling out those weapons will take time, and in the interim, Russian attacks will most certainly continue. Civilians are dying. Entire families are being killed, Mr. Ayev said. We need more missiles. We need these missiles as much as we need air. Iranians mourn a slain leader and call for vengeance. Millions of people filled the streets of Iran to bid farewell to Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who was killed in the war with the United States and Israel. This article is by Abdi Latif Tahar, Aaron Boxerman, Farnaz Fasihi, and Leo Sands. Millions of people massed in the Iranian capital on Monday to mourn Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the former supreme leader, with many carrying signs calling for vengeance for his killing early in the war launched by the United States and Israel. Huge crowds thronged a truck carrying the Ayatollah's coffin as it traveled slowly through the jam-packed streets of Tehran. Posters at the procession displayed images of Ayatollah Khamenei and a clenched fist. Mourners carried portraits depicting President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance behind crosshairs. There will be blood, read an English language slogan that was frequently displayed next to an image of Mr. Trump. Iranian officers sprayed water to try to cool down the flag waving mourners as temperatures soared over 90 degrees. The week long funeral has been intricately choreographed by the government both to honor a ruler who crushed dissent and expand Iran's hardline Islamist and anti Western policies and to project national unity and defiance. Ayatollah Khomeini led Iran for more than 37 years until February 28th, when he was killed on the first day of the U.S. Israeli attack. The United States and Iran have since reached a fragile ceasefire, though talks aimed at a lasting peace have been paused until after the funeral ceremonies. Later this week, the Ayatollah's coffin will be taken to several cities in Iran and neighboring Iraq that are significant to Shiite Muslims before his body is buried in Mashhad, a city of over 3 million people in northeastern Iran, where the Ayatollah was born in 1939. Shiite Muslims revere Mashhad as Iran's holiest city because of its close association with Imam Raza, one of 12 religious leaders considered by Shiites to be spiritual heirs of the Prophet Muhammad. Apart from his political power, Ayatollah Khomeini wielded considerable religious authority for Shiite Muslims. The mourners who streamed into Tehran on Monday had traveled from Iraq, Yemen, India, and Pakistan, which have large Shiite populations, as well as from African nations such as Senegal, Nigeria, which have smaller ones. Notably absent was the former supreme leader's son and his successor, Ayatollah Mojtabi Khamenei. He has not been seen in public since Israel forces bombed the family's compound in Tehran and killed his father. The younger Ayatollah Khomeini is believed to have been seriously wounded in that strike. Again, I'm skipping some of the middle. The Times was granted access to the funeral ceremonies by Iran's government, which determined the events the reporters, accompanied by a government provided translator and guide, could attend. The views expressed by people interviewed at the events may not be representative of many Iranians, while others may have felt unable to speak freely. In phone interviews, some Iranians said that they were dismayed by all the pageantry and that they found the grand procession demoralizing and infuriating. They're burying someone who was responsible for the massacre of January, said Mazad, 28, an artist in Tehran. Like others interviewed by phone, he asked to be identified only by his first name for fear of repercussions. They have been treating the families who have lost their children horribly, he said. Mehdi, a 45-year-old political prisoner who lives in Tehran, said the funeral procession had passed through places where protests and clashes with the government had taken place. The same security forces who are spraying water and handing food to the funeral attendees today were shooting at our youth a few months ago in the very same location, he said. Ram Alvandi, a professor of Iranian history at the London School of Economics, said the official messaging of the funeral portraying Ayatollah Khomeini as a martyr deserving of revenge was in part intended to legitimize his son. Some of the posters at the procession also sought to disparage Mr. Trump and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel by linking them to Jeffrey Epstein, the convicted sex offender. Mustafa Ayed, a Middle East expert in the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, a research group in London, said the Epstein message was common among supporters of the Iranian government. It's a longstanding narrative intended to highlight Western degeneracy in contrast to the moral purity of Iran's clerical regime, he said. It is also intended, he said, to draw attention to what Iran perceives as one of Mr. Trump's political vulnerabilities. How the Iran war ignited a clash between Trump and the Saudi crown prince. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman pressed President Trump earlier to cripple Iran, but as Iran asserted its power, the prince urged a ceasefire is now pursuing his security priorities. This article is by Edward Wong. President Trump and his military commanders were in a bind. They had announced the start of a new mission to help guide commercial ships through the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran had effectively closed early in the war. U.S. naval and air power would ward off any Iranian attacks during a tentative ceasefire, the commander said. But the U.S. Central Command was caught by surprise when officials from Saudi Arabia and American forces could not use the kingdom's airspace for the mission, which the Pentagon was calling Project Freedom. The Americans had not consulted the Saudis. That set off a flurry of tense and urgent phone calls between Washington and the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, leader of Saudi Arabia. An outraged Mr. Trump spoke with him on May 4th, the first day of the operation, and on the next 2 days as well, U.S. officials said. Vice President J.D. Vance talked to the prince in a separate call, as did Steve Witkoff, the special envoy to the Middle East, and Jared Kushner, Mr. Trump's son in law. Marco Rubio, the White House National Security Advisor, spoke to his counterpart. The Crown Prince stood his ground, fearing that the American plan could reignite the war. The Trump administration was forced to shut down Project Freedom less than 48 hours after it had begun. They had lost all confidence in the administration, and they thought if they let the U.S. use their airspace, they would get hit even harder by Iran, said Hussein Abish, a scholar at the Arab Gulf States Institute in Washington. The all hands campaign by the White House to sway Prince Mohammed, which was not previously reported, and the other crucial moments during the war revealed American and Saudi officials became increasingly at odds over how to approach security in the region, particularly with regard to Iran and Israel. And more, the Saudis see the U.S. government as unreliable and even on occasion at risk to Gulf Arab nations. Since the United States and Israel attacked Iran on February 28th, Saudi Arabia has tried to chart a middle course to protect its interests. It gave military and diplomatic support to the United States and was attacked by Iran. But the kingdom has also opposed Mr. Trump at critical moments, flexing its muscles when it sensed greater dangers resulting from American and Israeli aggression. As Mr. Trump tries to navigate diplomacy with Iran, with a focus on Tehran's nuclear program, Saudi Arabia continues to carry out its own initiatives, veering away from the American priorities and moving to straighten ties with other nations. That includes Pakistan and China, which helped broker a diplomatic opening between the kingdom and Iran in 2023. The Saudi foreign minister is visiting China this week. Because of that opening, Saudi officials are speaking directly to their Iranian counterparts about Iran's control of the strait, missile arsenal, and support for regional militias, all of which the Saudi leadership considers to be a bigger threat than the nuclear issue. Prince Mohammed has carried out the balancing act all year. He laid out the risks of war to Mr. Trump before the conflict started, then later urged the American president to continue the fighting to destroy the Iranian government, according to people briefed by U.S. officials. Saudi Arabia has denied this, but as Iranian power persisted, Prince Mohammed pushed for a settlement. Again, I'm skipping to the end. In public, the Saudis have praised Mr. Trump's memorandum of understanding with Iran, which laid the foundation for the ceasefire. I think it's incredibly important and very significant that we have an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, that will hopefully put an end to this conflict and, more importantly, open the pathway towards resolving many of the outstanding issues, Prince Faisal, the foreign minister, said on June 18th at a forum in Vienna. Primary among them, of course, is the nuclear issue. But Saudi officials are adopting a wait and see approach on outcomes of the agreement. For one thing, they have not committed any funds to rebuilding Iran, which the agreement calls for from America and its regional partners. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And again, the number to call to hear entirety the articles that I'm abbreviating is 716-821-5555. Rebel Catholics defy Vatican's calls to return to mainstream church. The Vatican has excommunicated the priesthood of a rebel Catholic faction. Many of the priest's followers have refused to renounce them. This article is by Elisabetta Povoledo. When the Vatican excommunicated the priesthood of a rebel conservative faction this week, creating the biggest schism in the Roman Catholicism in decades, it also hoped to drive the group's many followers back to the mainstream church. Instead, according to interviews with some of the faction's followers in Argentina, Italy, and Switzerland, the punishment has been met with defiance. It changes nothing, said Blandine Guillaumin, 42, a teacher at a school run by the group in France. Ms. Guillaumin said she would remain part of the faction called the Society of St. Pius X or the 10th, even if the Vatican went ahead with its threat to excommunicate worshippers who stayed loyal to the breakaway group. We are sure we are doing God's will, Miss Guglielmin said. It is the society, not the Vatican, she said, that represents pure, authentic Catholicism. Ms. Guglielmin's defiance embodied the climax of a 56-year-old impasse between the Vatican and the Society, founded in 1970 to protest the Roman Catholic Church's modernizing turn after the Second Vatican Council, which took place between 1962 and 1965. The Society bemoans the Council's change to the forms of Catholic services. Though the Council allowed priests to hold services in vernacular languages, the Society still celebrates the traditional Latin Mass, urging it preserves a sense of reverence and mystery. The Society also rejects the substance of the Council's teaching, which it says contradicts the Church millennial teaching. The Society's members oppose the Council's acceptance of other religions and its push for interfaith dialogue and outreach to other Christian denominations. They point to the Council as the beginning of the end for the Catholic Church, resulting in fewer people in European pews, fewer priests in pulpits, and all manner of perceived heresies and errors. The number of Catholics is, in fact, rising, at least in America and Africa. Vatican leaders, including Pope Leo, naturally dispute the faction's position, saying that it has broken with key church teachings. Leo said last month that its followers refuse to accept certain fundamental elements of the church. Andrea Tornielli, a senior Vatican official who helps run its communications department, wrote in an editorial on Thursday that the group was very far removed from the Catholic faith because it refused to accept the diversity of Catholic teaching. These disagreements culminated last week in the tiny Swiss hamlet of Écon, where the Society's founder, Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, oversaw the construction of its first cemetery in 1970. In a ritual-laden ceremony on Wednesday, the Society's new leaders defied Pope Leo XIV by consecrating 4 bishops against his will, an event that the group said attracted some 17,000 people. A day later, the Vatican declared the Society was in schism with the Church and issued an excommunication decree against its bishops, 6 in all, after Wednesday's ceremony, as well as its priests, barring them from officiating marriages and hearing confessions, which were considered to be invalid. Other clergy and the lay faithful were told that they risked excommunication if they continued to follow society's teaching. The Vatican offered an olive branch to those who wanted to leave the society, issuing specific instructions as to how they could return to the Catholic fold. Again, I'm skipping to the end. In Albano Laziale, outside Rome, the Reverend Gabriel Divino said the faction had prepared their followers for 2 years for the consecrations and their possible fallout. We have spoken about it in our writings and our homilies, said Father Divino, who leads the society's roughly 2,000 followers in Italy. Only one family left the flock since the excommunications, he said. The others understood the problem and they do not feel polluted by these sanctions, he added. Emile Beauvais defended Trump in court, then Trump made him a judge. President Trump is appointing his former personal lawyers to judgeships, part of a larger effort to put his stamp on the federal courts. This article is by Matthias Schwartz. Not long after Emile Joseph Beauvais III first donned the robe as a federal appeals court judge in September, one of his new colleagues was surprised upon catching a glimpse of the background image on his iPhone. It was the photo of Donald J. Trump, bloodied by a would be assassin's bullet in Butler, PA, with one fist raised in the air. A former personal lawyer for Mr. Trump, Judge Beauvais is not the first jurist to hold on to a political memento or two from a past life. But the Butler photo, which was described by 3 people with knowledge of it, caused discomfort on the close-knit 14-sit appeals court for Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. It touches on a central question about Judge Beauvais, who before joining the bench was known as an attack dog for Mr. Trump, whether his loyalty to the president might override his commitment to the rule of law. Those concerns echo a broader issue facing the country's judiciary as Mr. Trump fills the 13 courts of appeal with judges who have voted overwhelmingly for his agenda. About a third of federal appellate judges are now Trump appointees. Some of those who have worked closely with Judge Beauvais on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit and who spoke on the condition of anonymity to describe internal matters said the answer in this case is not yet clear. They offered a nuanced picture of how the young judge, 45, is acclimating to his new role. His jurisprudence has been broadly aligned with the White House policies on diversity and immigration, but he has not yet ruled on a case that clearly involves Mr. Trump's personal interests. Beyond the photo on his phone, which has not been previously reported, Judge Beauvais has drawn public criticism for attending one of Mr. Trump's campaign-style rallies in December. The incident led to an ethics complaint that is being considered by the chief judge of an appeals court. Nancy Gertner, a retired federal judge, said Judge Beauvais' attendance at the rally suggested that he still saw himself as Mr. Trump's advocate. When he was nominated, my concern was that he was not just the president's lawyer, but a zealot, she said. He was doing and saying things that were inappropriate, and he's continuing to do so now. As he approaches the end of his first year on the Third Circuit, Judge Beauvais' rulings have been reliably conservative. On a bench that prides itself on a tradition of centrist collegiality, his acerbic solo dissents have irritated some judges and lawyers. But he also has shown a knack for persuading others, mostly the court's 5 other Trump appointees, to join his opinions. And he has recused himself from political matters he had touched while he was at the Justice Department in early 2025, which legal experts point to as an indication that he is cognizant of his ethical obligations. In interviews, some who have worked closely with Judge Beauvais praised his work ethic and polite manner with other judges. By all accounts, he has thrown himself into the job, rising early to drive more than an hour to his chambers in Newark, New Jersey, and using a text-to-speech app to listen to books and opinions on the way. A spokesman for the court said Judge Beauvais declined to comment. At his confirmation hearing last year, he insisted, "I'm not anybody's henchman." Judge Beauvais, one of 3 of Mr. Trump's former personal lawyers who he has nominated for the appellate bench, pushed hard for Mr. Trump's policy agenda as a senior official at the Justice Department. His age and resume, 2 clerkships, and 9 years as a federal prosecutor have also driven speculation that Mr. Trump might choose him to fill a potential Supreme Court vacancy. To Mr. Trump's supporters, Judge Beauvai's elevation to the federal bench represents a course correction from the first Trump term. Then nominations were guided by the leadership of the Federalist Society, a pipeline for conservative legal talent that has drawn fire from Mr. Trump when his nominees rule against him. Now he is reshaping the bench by turning to lawyers he feels would be more loyal to him and his agenda. Again, I'm moving towards the end, but for conservative, the outspoken defense of Mr. Trump's deportation agenda was heartening. Michael Fragasso, the former chief counsel to Senator Mitch McConnell, had posted what he called a trolling meme showing Judge Beauvais alongside Judge Aileen M. Cannon of the Southern District of Florida, who issued a series of rulings favorable to Mr. Trump when he was being prosecuted as newly minted justices on an expanded Supreme Court. Judge Beauvais, Mr. Fragasso, said in an interview, was already proving himself capable of persuading his peers. Anyone can write a law review article in a dissent, he said. What's harder is getting to a sound outcome as part of a 3-judge panel. Can the world's largest stadium explain the global economy? High growth rates and surging exports in Vietnam mask deep frustrations in one of Asia's most ambitious countries. This is a news analysis by Damien Cave. The world's largest soccer stadium, designed to resemble a Vietnamese drum with space for 135,000 fans, began to take shape outside central Hanoi in February, a few weeks before the United States and Israel attacked Iran. Despite the global economic turmoil brought about by the war, and perhaps even because of it, construction on the arena and a surrounding urban development has expanded and accelerated. The Vietnamese government is leaning on big projects to make up for potential economic slowdowns caused by the war and President Trump's tariffs. Huge state-favored firms like Vingroup, which is building the stadium, are booming. So are foreign manufacturing giants that have made Vietnam an export hub, all while smaller businesses are struggling to survive and often being pushed aside. For small companies like us, it's so challenging. It's harder and it's not fair, said Pham Thi Mu, 36, as she stuffed a Spider-Man comforter into a bag at her family's bedding factory near the stadium on land that is soon to be redeveloped. We pour our hearts into everything, and we're the first to suffer. The dynamic exemplifies how the war in Iran and the economic shock waves it precipitated are accelerating a trend in Vietnam and around the world. Big businesses find a way to get bigger while smaller local companies are being squeezed by spiking inflation or energy shortages. The Vietnamese government and the banks overinvested in certain industries, especially real estate, have not been much help. Too big to fail. Experts have expressed both optimism and concern for this ambitious country of 100 million. The World Bank's most recent report on Vietnam referred to an uneven growth model where global firms drive exports but generate limited local benefits because wages are low and few Vietnamese companies are integrated into higher value supply chains. Jonathan Pincus, an economist at Fulbright University in Ho Chi Minh City, described it as a two-track economy. Essentially, the wealthiest firms rarely interact with the smaller businesses that represent 95% of the country's companies. Vietnamese officials have acknowledged the problem for years, noting that sustainable development requires a strong domestic business base. But with Communist Party leaders pushing hard for 10% annual growth and managing only 7 so far this year, officials still chase sale. Big ticket foreign investment is seen as an elevator to career promotion in the party, and the turmoil of the past few months has only intensified the government's go big and globalist focus. While Hanoi remains concerned that Washington will punish it for exporting far more to the United States than it buys, Vietnam continues to successfully recruit companies fleeing China partly to avoid and circumvent U.S. tariffs. Again, skipping to the end, Vietnam's Ministry of Finance recently promised to help, possibly by guiding banks to grant loans based on business performance, as in common in other countries. And yet, large foreign companies are still driving the biggest news. Samsung recently said it plans to invest about 1.5 billion in a semiconductor testing facility north of Hanoi. It's first in Vietnam. The site is set to open in 2027. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. China tests long range ballistic missile in the Pacific, angering neighbors. China's firing of a submarine launched missile came as Australia secured more defense deals with Pacific Island nations. Countries expressed concern about the test. This article is by Victoria Kim and Chris Buckley. China test fired a long range ballistic missile with a dummy warhead in the Pacific Ocean on Monday, the first such launch in almost 2 years, prompting alarmed countries to criticize the move as destabilizing. Governments in the region were warned of the launch shortly beforehand. The overt display of China's fast expanding military capabilities threatens to further fan a defense buildup around the Pacific in the midst of anxieties about the strength of the U.S. commitment to the region. The missile was launched from a Chinese nuclear powered submarine and sent a mock warhead into the Pacific Ocean, according to a report from Xinhua, China's official news agency. The missile landed accurately in the designated area, the report said. The test launch at 12:01 p.m. Beijing time, Xinhua said, was not directed against any specific country or target. It was not immediately clear where the missile was fired from or landed. The launch came as the leaders of Australia and Fiji announced a mutual defense treaty and a regional security alliance, the latest in a string of agreements Canberra has been striking with Pacific Island nations that are widely viewed as efforts to push back against China's encroachment. In September 2024, China fired a nuclear capable intercontinental ballistic missile carrying a dummy warhead across the Pacific Ocean into waters near French Polynesia, drawing condemnation from countries in the region. It was China's first known ICBM test in the Pacific region in 4 decades. The United States routinely carries out test launches of ballistic missiles from land or sea, including one fired from California at a target in the Marshall Islands this March. Winston Peters, New Zealand's foreign minister, said in a statement the country was deeply concerned and that Monday's test seemed to be part of a recurring pattern by New Zealand considers this an unwelcome and concerning development. We, like our neighbors in other Pacific countries, have no interest in China using the South Pacific as a testing site for missile capability, he said. Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong called the test destabilizing to the region and said that it was in the context of a rapid military buildup by China. The Japanese government said in a statement on Monday that it had conveyed its serious concern regarding the intensification of China's military activities. Japan had urged China to reconsider the launch after receiving the warning, the statement said. Last year, a Chinese naval task force also carried out live fire drills in the Tasman Sea between Australia and New Zealand, prompting dozens of civilian flights to change course to avoid the area. John Blaxland, the professor of international security at the Australian National University and a former Australian military intelligence officer, said that Beijing was testing not only its own capabilities, but the reactions from countries in the region, as well as the United States. What China is doing, like they're doing with Taiwan, is probing and testing and incrementally acclimatizing intrusive, assertive, authoritarian behavior, he said. In its announcement on Monday, the Chinese government did not specify the type of missile it tested. Jeffrey Lewis, a scholar at Middlebury College in Vermont who studies China's nuclear weapons modernization, said that he thought the Chinese military was most likely testing the JL-3, a new generation of ICBM that is designed to carry a nuclear warhead and be launched from submarines. China displayed the JL-3 missile at a military parade in Beijing last year. A Pentagon report in 2023 said that the missile was being deployed on China's latest generation of submarines, making them capable of striking the continental United States from the Chinese coast. The region should expect more tests, Mr. Lewis said. It suggests a new era of testing where every system will get its moment in the sun, he said, referring to China's growing array of nuclear capable missiles. He said that more such tests would give China greater confidence in its excuse me. The Chinese have historically tested their ICBMs less than other countries, Mr. Lewis said. I think that was political, and now those politics have changed, and I think they're adopting an approach of testing more. They're willing to pay the political costs of that in a way that they weren't in the past. China's submarine based missiles have long been a weak spot in the country's nuclear deterrent. Its nuclear powered submarines have been noisier than those of other powers, especially the United States, making them easier to detect and potentially destroy. But the People's Liberation Army has been trying to narrow the gap by developing stealthier submarines and new missiles. The 2024 test most likely involved a DF-31 road mobile missile that was launched from Hainan, an island province in southern China, according to an analysis published by the Federation of American Scientists. Ending on a more positive note than some of the news today, what the pursuit of happiness looks like 250 years in. When we asked dozens of people how they pursue happiness in 2026, a single theme stood out. To be American, it seems, is to strive. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, those were the three inalienable rights laid out 250 years ago in the Declaration of Independence, America's founding document. The last part of the phrase can also be perceived as a challenge. You have life, you have liberty, the rest is up to you. We sought to understand how Americans are taking up that challenge in 2026. The pursuit takes many forms. Some are relatively concrete, like chasing the enduring dream of upward mobility, material wealth, professional success, fame. But many people are engaged in far more nebulous quests for clarity or purpose, exhilaration or serenity. But a single theme stood out across geographic, demographic, and philosophical lines. To be American, it seems, is to strive. Something better, something more fulfilling could be within reach if you are willing to chase it. In other words, the pursuit is the point. At 77, Doug Garr finds he has happiness when experiencing the thrill of jumping out of planes as often as several times a month. Doug Garr did the math. In his 77 years, he has spent roughly a day and a half of his life in free falls. He is approaching his 2,500th skydiving jump, having spent decades chasing the unmatched exhilaration that comes from leaping out of a plane 13,500 feet in the sky. We're in our element, said Mr. Garr, a writer in New York. We can kind of escape reality, which is the ups and downs and the tensions of normal life. He skydived for the first time at 20. He lied on a form about his age because the company required jumpers to be at least 21. On the plane, he remembered being petrified. On the ground, he laughed hysterically. I had just cheated death, he recalled. That feeling was all it took. Eventually, his wife gave him an ultimatum, skydiving or her. He chose her. Decades went by without a jump, but his wife had a stroke, and in 2008, he found himself in need of a release from the stress of caring for her. He returned to skydiving. He now jumps as often as several times a month, keeping watch for the right conditions, clear skies, steady winds, warm temperatures. He will head to New Jersey or Connecticut with his skydiving friends, and they might jump a few times over the course of a day. Barb and Kyle White found community in their form of bliss as docents at the Lighthouse in Bailey's Harbor, Wisconsin. Barb White and her husband Kyle applied for the gig as volunteer lighthouse keepers on a lark. The location was dreamy. Bailey's Harbor, a fishing town of 14,000 people on the Door Peninsula in northeast Wisconsin, jutting into Lake Michigan. The job seemed simple enough, spending a week as live-in docents on a nature preserve, greeting a stream of daily visitors to the lighthouse and explaining its 157-year history. They were accepted, and 3 years in, the week at the lighthouse each summer is a highlight of their year, a literal beacon of happiness, but it has gone beyond that. We're always thinking, what is the week at the lighthouse going to reveal? Some new thinking, some new awareness, Miss White said on a recent morning. The lighthouse shows the way. Ms. White, a former teacher who's now a consultant, and Mr. White, an artist, have been married for 35 years. Now they save their weightiest life decisions for the lighthouse. They use the week to step back from their busy lives, and let their minds wander in other directions. They kayak in the bay and hike through the woods. Sorry, I've got to scroll a little bit. Seeking fame is fundamental to how Malcolm Woods pursues happiness. He is trying to make it as a stand up comedian in Miami under the stage name Malcolm McFly. As soon as Malcolm McFly grabbed the mic at Fort Lauderdale Improv one recent night, he made eye contact with people in the crowd. He joked about the faulty microphone that had disrupted other comic sets, and he made a crack about his name, a stage name actually created to separate his show business aspirations from his regular life. He was sending a signal. I'm here to talk to you, not at you. He needed the audience on his side, connected with him. The importance of that he had learned just recently, as he is not even a year into performing as a stand up comedian. Half of it is jokes, he said, but the other half is can you convince the audience to like you? And if they like you, they'll laugh at you. Making audiences laugh and the pure pleasure it brings matters more to him than nearly anything else. In Baker, California, Louis Ramallo chases happiness by betting his wealth on an otherworldly ambition. An alien spaceship sits just off a dusty highway in the Mojave Desert. For years, it had existed only as a vision in Louis Ramallo's mind. But now the giant saucer, made of concrete and steel, is visible to everyone passing through Baker, California, an outpost between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. All it took was Mr. Ramallo's pluck, fortune, and unwavering belief in the sun bleached town where so many others have seen their ambitions wither in the heat. He found his version of happiness, opportunity for himself and his family, by taking a big gamble in tiny Baker. There, his store was the most conspicuous presence on Baker Boulevard. Alien Fresh Jerky, a gleaming emporium of dehydrated meats with extraterrestrial quiche of Roswell, New Mexico, and the gaudy glitz of Vegas. The business has afforded him a nice life. He drives a BMW and built a sprawling home behind the store. Still, he wants more. Adjacent to the store, the three-story UFO remains unfinished. The inspiration for it, he said, came from one he believes he saw hovering over his property about 25 years ago. As usual, I've taken liberties and abbreviated many of these articles. To hear them in their entirety, 716-821-5555. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the July 7th issue of the front section of the New York Times. We read from the front section of the New York Times every Sunday at 1. Your reader has been Patrice. It has been my pleasure to read to you. Thank you for listening and have a great day.